Brent Kirkland is a creative professional in the sports documentary space, currently serving as a senior producer at Gamecocks Plus while working under the sport and story umbrella. With a background in documentary filmmaking from Wake Forest's graduate program, he has a passion for storytelling that goes beyond surface level narratives, as evidenced by his thoughtful documentary about his father's experience in the beer industry. Brent specializes in creating in-depth content that captures the nuanced human stories behind sports, balancing his love for long-form storytelling with the challenges of modern media consumption. Welcome, Brent. Good to have you on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to have a little chat here.
Yeah. Now tell me, Brent, in an era of increasingly fragmented attention and bite-sized content, how do you balance your deep storytelling instincts with the need to create narratives that can actually break through the noise and truly connect with an audience?
Well, I think the biggest thing with that is trying to find good stories, right? I think that's like a definitely, I don't want to necessarily call it a myth, but, I think a lot of people will say they don't want to, like, nobody watches anything over 5 seconds anymore and stuff. And when you're on social media, like, there's a lot of truth to that, obviously. But if you look at what Netflix has done and Amazon Prime and a lot of these over the last recent, 4 or 5 years or so, like, I mean, people will sit down and watch a 10-part docuseries about Michael Jordan, right? So I think the key is the biggest thing. I mean, there are a few different reasons too, but like the biggest thing for me is like how do you find really good stories that captivate the audience that you're trying to reach to. So for us, like with I mean, obviously our fan base is Gamecock fans, right? So the people we're behind a paywall with Gamecocks Plus. So essentially, the people who have access to, I mean, you can subscribe directly to it, but basically the people who have access to our content are Gamecock Club members, so boosters. So we have to think about, and honestly, our like digital teams who work with all the sports, I mean, they're some of the best in the country, right? So like we always say, is like they don't necessarily need me to come in and make good social media content for them. But one thing that we lack, and I think why we were brought here, is because there are a lot of good stories and historical stories about these teams and current athletes, especially that need more than 30 seconds on Instagram or whatever platform to tell their story.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, sure, when you're on these sort of social media platforms, short is good, but I think the idea behind it is relevancy. I think there's a high level of relevancy, whether it's short form or long form. If you've got a story that's quite important to people right now, I think that's gonna sell pretty quick.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's like the piece we won our Emmy for last year, the Southeast ones. So we did a piece a year ago about Darius Rush. So he's currently an NFL football player, but he not like you'll see a lot of videos or like teams putting out draft videos, right? So it's maybe a couple minute story and it's them, getting the call from whatever NFL team, and they're celebrating, and it's a few good sound bites, maybe some cool highlights with some rap music, something like that. We ended up doing like a 15-minute, or it's about 20-minute story about his life, and a lot of like what his life was going through when I think he was around 12, 13. I could be off a little bit, but his dad died in a car wreck on their way to church, and so a lot of it was talking about that and that adversity and how he had to battle through that personally to even before he even got to USC, and then once he got here, battling those demons and still, on top of trying to be a starter on an SEC program, right? Like it's that's adversity in and of itself. So I think, finding those types of stories of, okay, like how do we want to do draft stuff, but how do we do something that's different, but also a good story, right? Like, I don't necessarily want to just go do a draft story on a guy who's hasn't had much adversity. He's a good athlete, and went to USC and he's been good here. Like, that's cool. I'm happy for him, but like, that's not the kind of stories that are going to captivate people and get us seen.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Brent, what do you feel like with regards to the business right now and the competitive landscape, where does it stand right now in relation to each other?
Sorry, could you repeat that one?
Yeah, so in your opinion, what does your current competitive landscape look like with regards to the business right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're seeing a lot of Gamecocks pluses pop up right now, right? So, I mean, obviously, Sport and Story, I'd say maybe a little bit more fun competitive. Like as I explained to you earlier, like Sport and Story is kind of the overarching company that sees all of the universities they work with. So from we have Gamecocks Plus, Oklahoma State, OSU Max, Hogs Plus is kind of like the original flagship one, and then a couple others like Auburn, LSU. So especially all of us being in the same conference, right? Like obviously we compete against each other in a way, but obviously like we're all part of the same company. So it is a little bit different that way. But I will say like Clemson plus just down the road. I mean, obviously that's a natural rivalry, anyways. So and I met those guys. They're awesome. They're really good at what they do. So I wouldn't say it's like an athletic rivalry that way, but I will just say that they put out a lot of good stuff. I see some of the stuff they put out, and it's really high level. So I just think that there's more and more people trying to do what Sport and Story is doing, and so which is good. Like I think competition is great and it makes things better,
Yeah.
right? But at the end of the day, it also forces us to be innovative, and we can't just get lazy with our storytelling. And it's just like, oh, Gamecock fans, they'll consume it. Who cares? We can put 50% into this thing. I think for us to continue to keep our contracts with the university, and we're going to have to show that the content we're putting out is getting more subscribers, and that basically means getting more boosters, more people that want to get Gamecock Club memberships. And so I think the biggest way to do it, I mean, I talk about this all the time when I explain like the Olympics, right? Like my mom, I love her, but she could care less about sports, right? But when we watch the Olympics and they have like a heartfelt story about the runner, the swimmer that you're about to go watch in competition, now all of a sudden she's into it and she wants to watch it. And whether they succeed or fail, like she lives through that. And so I kind of apply that to what we do. So when people see that, let's be honest, like not every Gamecock fan that goes to a football game is going to go to the swim and dive meet or a softball game. But if you can connect with those fans and show them awesome stories, like I think practice has shown over the years that will draw in fans, because like sports are more than just what happens on the scoreboard. People want to see the stories.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Brent, how are you currently spending your day? What's most of your time focused on?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's always kind of erratic. Like I said, we've been doing baseball, like our So I'll kind of go back. So we do a series called The Follow, and that's pretty consistent across all of our platforms at the schools we work with. Basically, essentially, think of it like a Hard Knocks, right? I wouldn't say we go quite as much access and deep as some of the stuff they do on that, but essentially, like we usually each season we follow one of the sports, and it's varies from like a weekly, like football is a week to week docu series, which is it can be very challenging at times. But like some of the other ones, spring and winter sports, we'll usually do bi-weekly. I think right now we're doing like a monthly episode with baseball, but of course a lot of that kind of varies too. Like that puts us like baseball is just they're having a very challenging season to start off right now. So it's like, you have to make decisions like, do we continue to do this or how do we do it differently and that kind of thing. So,
Right. Uh, how do you do things differently? What is the decision-making process behind this? Like you also mentioned, you touched on a very positive aspect of competition, which is yes, it keeps you moving, it keeps you on your toes and keeps you on your feet. Um, what what are the indications that now is a time to like sit down and make a plan? And
yep.
how do you go through this?
Yeah. So, I mean, it starts before the season. I'll use these follows because that's a lot of what we do. But even if we're doing a more like a short doc, we would have a lot of pre-planning that goes into it. I mean, like I always tell people, is like before being a journalist or any other words you want to say like that. Like for me, I'm a filmmaker. That's who I am. That's why I got into this business. And so when I think about how to be differently, it's like how can you make a cinematic story? Like I love movies, right? That's why I want to do this. So I watch a bunch of them, and when I write a plan out, I don't care how silly it sounds to people. Look at like when I approach this docu series, what we're doing with baseball. I watch Moneyball. I watch all these different types of like sports documentaries about baseball, and I'm like, how do we make it? I mean, obviously we don't have the production value, but with what we have, how can we make something on that level? And like, and you talk about competition, like Ole Miss has, they've been doing it forever. That was actually kind of like one of the things I first saw that kind of inspired me to want to do this work, because they've been doing it forever, but it's called The Season. Kind of the same idea of what we do with The Follow. But, there's, not a lot of people doing that in this conference right now as far as like a week to week or, a whole season long documentary about it. And so, like, one of my goals I write out is, like, I want this to be the best in the conference. So that means that's our only competition. Like, I can watch their stuff, and they do a hell of a job. But I'm like, I want to make this the best docuseries in the SEC. Like, my standard that I set for myself is if SEC Network or ESPN wanted to pick this up tomorrow, there would be no question about it. They'd be like, yeah, let's run this. So, I said it's not always the easiest thing to do, especially working sometimes with teams. Is like I get passionate about it, I'm into it. They're not always that way. And I understand like it's a distraction sometimes, right? To want to do all that, but the biggest thing I think is just with coming with that mindset and then putting it pen to paper. Like a lot of times, I've sat in a lot of production meetings and people, have it's fun and we throw out a bunch of ideas, but nobody puts pen to paper. They never put it to action. It's one of the professors I worked with when I was at the University of Nevada, Merton Runningwolf. He worked a long time in LA and Hollywood and stuff like that. He had started. I actually been in a few movies. He was an actor as well, and so that was like the biggest thing he taught me. It was just like, a lot of people have good ideas or fun ideas, but people don't want to put that action, put that into action. And so that's my biggest thing is creating with like a creative plan is like, we're going to set goals. It doesn't mean you're always going to hit every goal, right? But you're going to work your ass off trying to. And you have like a cinematic plan in place. So like when you show up, it's not just like, oh, let's shoot practice or like what's going on, and you're just totally confused and just running and gunning. Like I hear that all the time. It's like, let's just run and gun. It's like, which I understand, but like if you're prepared, like it should never really feel like a run and gun. Like you should know exactly the kind of stuff that you're looking for to tell a story.
I completely agree. And with regards to, going above and beyond and putting pen to paper, like actually making things happen, what's that mean for some of the metrics in the business? How does that impact the bottom line possibly? What are some of the most important metrics that you want to hit and maybe your management want to hit as well?
Yeah, I think a lot of the kind of things would want to. I don't work quite as much with that aspect, which I should should do a lot more. I'm usually more on the creative side, but I would say like definitely getting. You look at like our memberships; it's unique views, right? And so it's not just. Obviously you want it's like view rates too, so you want to make sure that the people who are clicking are staying and watching it. Like that is very important. I want to say that might be more important. Like once you get people in the doors, keeping them there, like wanting, especially when you're doing a docu series of like you want to create an environment where they want to come back next week and watch episode 2, episode 3. But part of that is also, and which keeps us getting is essentially I think was what's going to keep getting us contracts here at University of South Carolina is if we can continue to help them grow their donor base. And that's, unique clicks, you need more people wanting to watch our content, new people wanting to watch our content. As far as like on social media, like a big thing I always look at for me is like average view time. And so I know like usually you want to be, from what I've read, I don't know how true this is, but from my research, you want to be at least like 4 seconds, if not 4 to 8, 4 to 7. I've had some that have actually gone over that, which is good. So I'm always pretty excited when I see those, especially when we beat Clemson in football. Like that, I did a lot of good stuff with that one. So, plus, like anytime we beat Clemson here, it's just going to get a lot of people watching. So,
Yeah.
I'd say like social media wise, it's and honestly, it's made because when I first started doing it, like we were doing, I was doing very much like long movie trailers like you would see on like 30 for 30s where it's like a minute long, a minute and a half long. And I realized that like I was getting shorter view rates because people like I think they just see how long it is and they're just kind of it's easy to scroll past. But one thing I've really been working on is to like shorten those to the point where we can make something that's captivating in even 15 seconds, which can be you make a 20-25 minute episode and you condense it into 15 seconds. Like I mean, that's not easy. I'd say that's be like, oh, that must be so hard to make a documentary. I was like, honestly, I think it's harder to condense that into 50 seconds. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Now, what are some of the next 6 to 12 month goals for yourself, and maybe in terms of hitting those view rates and average view time? What's the management expectation for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say for now, like right now, I'm working on. I have a few projects, but like the main one, it's called Black Magic. So that was kind of like the theme of a team in 1984. It's considered really the best team that's ever played here. They had a chance to go to a national championship and pretty much and they were like a shock that year. Like no one expected them to do anything, and then lost like a random game to a like Navy team that was mediocre at best, and that like killed the university's like only kind of real chance at playing for a national title. And it's still like a game that's kind of like in folklore here. But I found it interesting because like when I started researching the story, there wasn't a lot of content on it, and so I thought that that's especially now as like the university grows and we see like what South Carolina and these SEC schools do on game day and like all the crazy LED lights and stuff. So I just think it's a good time 40 years later for like young people to remember like where all this culture and stuff came from, because it was right around that time when it's like basically the government made cable more affordable for everybody. And so at that point, that's when you started to see games on like TBS and ESPN and all this type of stuff. And so that was kind of when the game started to grow. It was like right around 83, 84. But yeah, sorry, I kind of like digress getting into the story, but it's definitely been more of an undertaking for me. Like I've already spent probably about 2 years almost on it, just like with the research and trying to. I still need to help us like try to get some funding for the project and stuff for the things I really want to do. Like I talk about it because it's like this is like, I've made some good stuff, obviously won an Emmy here, but like this is something I want to be like a feature documentary, and I think it has a chance to be something that's like really stand out. And so I'd say like my biggest thing over the next 6 to 12 months is I've already done several interviews. I have a few more, but like finishing the production process and getting into post-production over the summer so I can have that. Because the goal is like, you want to launch it at the right time, right? Like I don't want to launch a football documentary at the end of, like, let's say we have a bad season. Like nobody wants to go watch a football documentary about the Gamecocks if we go 4 wins, hopefully that doesn't happen, but so like the goal is just try to hit that, like start coming up with like a social media strategy. So once we get kind of where we have it edited, I can start creating some short trailers and stuff like that. Probably in August, right as like camp opens up, that would be the goal, and then start like getting it in people's minds. So that second week of the season, hopefully the idea would be to have a screening or something for the public, but at least so they've seen, a trailer at a game and they've seen a lot of stuff on it. So like by the time that's like people are talking about it, like you create a little buzz about this documentary in the community. So once we launch that, I think we can do better. I think that's the key of like, if having a social media plan instead of just being like, hey, let's cut a trailer, let's cut a cool video and post it. Like sometimes we just have to do that stuff. But I think for a project like this, like you really want to treat, I mean, it's just like Hollywood. I mean, look at Super Bowl. How many times you see an ad that says coming in July, whatever Marvel movie. So it's kind of that same strategy, really.
Yeah, right. And that's exciting stuff, Brent. What is like in terms of funding, you mentioned.
Yeah.
Who do you go for that, and how does that work?
Yeah, so I mean that's the thing. It's just I would it'd be cool if like the company could help me out with some of that stuff, but obviously that's especially the way the economy's been. It's not always possible to do all that stuff. So part of it's not only just pitching to other people; it's pitching my own company of like why I need money and like why this is necessary for the project, that kind of thing. We do have some animators and stuff like that. This film is going to need to use some animation, I think, just because there's just a lack of archival that I've been looking for 2 years. So there's just not a lot, unfortunately. So it's like working with like who in the company can help me with this or wants to help me with this project and lend their expertise to things like that, like animation, that kind of thing. Luckily, with what we do with like pay for music, I shouldn't have to really pay for music rights, which is really helpful. With what I've been able to kind of select some tracks already that I think will work. But yeah, I mean, I'd say those are kind of the main things that I'm kind of looking at. There is like one scene, like so. Part of what I want to explore, and I'm not sure how much the university will like me going too deep into it, but this idea in the community is called the chicken curse, and so it like goes way back in the time, like back when Clemson basically wanted to. When they were trying to become a school, and like the local legislature and the people at the University of South Carolina like voted against them breaking off to do their own thing, and so like one of the main legislature guys, actually the guy Ben Tillman who helped start Clemson, apparently flew through like a farmer's pitchfork in the quad and said that like cursed the university and all this stuff. It's kind of again like a folklore thing. There's different versions of the story, but that's kind of the main gist of it. But because of that, like ever since like Clemson, I mean, we've known has had a lot of success in athletics, especially football. But over the years, and it's not just like that game that explains to you that they lost in '84, but there's been a lot of times before that that just when it seems like South Carolina was gonna get over the hump and like win a national championship or win something big, like they just something crazy happened and they would always lose. So people like jokingly, but it kind of it's been a popular thing to talk about the chicken curse. Not so much lately with women's basketball. So a lot of sports have had a lot of success, but back then for sure. So like because of that, like so actually in 1992 they had that was their first year in the SEC. In their first game against Georgia at home, they had like a big booster hired a medicine man to come and like to basically give like some kind of voodoo dance or something to like rid them of this curse. So I want to create that scene. So I want to like hire an actor just because I think that'd be really cool to kind of talk about that, because like obviously like the climatic kind of turning point of the story is when they lose to Navy. So I kind of want to delve into that a little bit, but in like a fun, creative way, right? Like you talk about how do you be unique instead of just having somebody talk about it. Like getting an actor and recreating that scene at Willie B would be really cool, but of course like you got to pay an actor and that kind of stuff and get costumes, and so I don't think it'll be a huge. I'm not looking at it's not like $1 million budget or anything by any means, but if to get some help with animation and that, I could definitely we could use some help on that.
Now, tell me, how do you make this an Emmy, and how you made the last one an Emmy? What is consistent? What needs to change? What needs to happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think with that one, I mean, we did a really good job of just telling the story and getting into it. It's like I talk about recreations. I think one thing I did really good, instead of just them talking about the day his dad died, of like we went to his hometown and filmed a lot of stuff. Like went on the road, kind of where they drove by, and got a shot of that, and just try to recreate that scene so it creates more emotion. Like I mean, it's the basic show versus tell stuff, right? I've been hearing that since my first day at journalism school. But like really, really kind of owning that and being like trying to again just create a movie. Like think of yourself as a filmmaker, and like if I want to create this intense scene, what would Spielberg do? You know, that like literally having that kind of mindset. It's more thinking like a filmmaker than a journalist. Um, but I do think that kind of the difference with that one is the story had such natural like adversity and overcoming and that kind of stuff. We just knew it was a good opportunity. Like sometimes you just know the projects that's like, if we do this right, like, you know, this could be award winning. And I just think like anytime any athlete goes through adversity, that kind of stuff, I think it gives you a lot of opportunity to kind of do those things. Not that that's why you make it to win awards, but you kind of get that feeling like, you know, this is a pretty deep story. With this one, you know, it's I would say it's more of a passion project. I don't say it can't like do well and that kind of thing, but I mean, I'll still make it the same way. I'll still try to put, you know, a lot of creativity and you know, that filmmaking aspect I talk about, really try to make it very cinematic and kind of see where it goes. You know, I'm not too, if I am able to win another Emmy or something like that, that's cool. But for me, it's just more like having the passion of telling these stories. I mean, why I even got into this stuff is watching, because like originally I was like, when I first went to journalism school, my whole goal is to be like Al Michaels. Like I mean, it's always sports, but I wanted to get on TV and talk about football and broadcast. And then I tried it a couple times. And I was like, I am absolutely terrible at this. This is stressful. Like I just knew right away, like it wasn't for me. But I'd always been a pretty good writer and stuff like that. And I actually took like a kind of a documentary sports storytelling class at the time. There wasn't a lot of classes like that. It was fairly new, I think. But it's actually one of my mentors. He actually, one of my friends now, Paul Mitchell, he was at University of Nevada when I was there, but he taught the class, and he's a great professor. He's still a very close friend of mine and my family's, but he kind of is the one who made me understand like that was what I was good at. And so from the moment I like first, I'll never forget, like I wrote, we had to do like choose our story and write a piece on it. And everyone else, you know, I'm going to do the football team, I'm going to do the basketball team or whatever. And then he asked me, he's like, what are you going to do? And I was like, I just want to do something different. So I was like, I saw that we had a college bass fishing team. And so I was like, which, and it's funny because like if you're from Nevada in the desert, like, I mean, it's bass fishing, I know is popular a lot of places in the US like it is here, but like there's not really bass fishing in Nevada. So like they had to travel to California and stuff like that to do it, I think a lot of the time. So it was a very interesting story. I'll never get his face. So he just looked at me like so confused when I was like, oh, I'm going to do one on the bass fishing team. He's like, what? Like, how is that going to be entertaining? But after I was able to kind of like follow their story of trying to, you know, track down these competitions and like make a name for themselves in this like really Southeast dominated sport, you know, it ended up being a really good story. And so that's my, you know, like him making me understand that like, dude, you're really good at this. So, I mean, that's kind of what got me into this. And then like right around that time, 30 for 30 started. And I remember the first one I saw, all the stuff Jonathan Hawk, if you ever seen his stuff, I'm sure you probably have on ESPN. He's done several 30 for 30s, but he's kind of like my idol when it comes to this type of stuff. And the first one I saw was The Best That Never Was, about Marcus Dupree at Oklahoma. Super deep, interesting story, very cool. And I was just like, you know, this is what I want to do. So pretty much from that moment on, I guess, you know, by the time I had that class, it was right around the same time I watched that film. And I was like, ever since then, I've been kind of on a trajectory to do this. So I know it's kind of a long answer, but to add to why I do these films and like what's the most important to me is just because when it's the story and I want to do it in a very cinematic, fun way. So.
Yeah. No, absolutely, and I agree. Like that's the difference between making a film and an Emmy-winning film
Yeah.
is just that amount, that passion that goes into it. You just wanting to level up every single time. I
Yeah.
think that's the difference. Yeah. This has been lovely, Brent.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights, your experiences, and I'm sure the next film is going to be bloody awesome.
Yeah. I appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. Cool. That was great, Brent. Thank you so
Awesome,
much.
man.